Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us on the banks of the River Nidd again, and we're following on from the previous video that we did up here. Unfortunately we lost the second half of that footage, so where we were going to fish the rod and line, we've lost it, so we've decided to come back a couple of weeks later. And as you can see, conditions are completely different, but we're still going to sort of follow through with the same rod and line approach. As you can see, the river today is probably 2 foot up, bit of colour in it, and if anything it looks 10 times better than it did on that day where we caught a few fish. So hopefully we'll have a decent day today, so I can't wait to get fishing. In terms of what I've done, as you can see, I've decided to scrap the seat box because I'm not going to be fishing on the whip. I'm going to be stood up, like I say, watching the float go down the peg and fishing a bomb as well. So just standing up, it's a bit more comfortable, I can move around a bit more. Got my bait waiter, keep net, everything to hand, all my tackles behind me, so again, it's not everything's to hand. I'm not sort of leaving loads of stuff up the bank and just bringing the bare minimum. I've got just enough to crack on with here today. That's it, so that brings us on to the approach that I'm going to fish. Very similar to last time, same bait tray. I've got hemp, a couple of pints of red maggots and some dendrobinas as well. I'm going to be looking to loose feed today. Again, in contrast to the previous session, I'm not going to feed any ground bait. I'm going to concentrate, like I say, on a running line approach towards the trees. So I've set up a few different rigs to cover my options today. The first one, like you saw last time, is a bomb. In this case, I've set up the 12-foot version with a slightly heavier quiver tip. That's the 1.5 ounce quiver tip on this Maver Power Light. But it's the same again, 8-pound day with TDR on the reel line. Nice and heavy and robust, because if I'm catching fish on this, they could be even barbling here, so I want to get them out if I do hook one. So like I say, nice, strong, robust main line. A 1 ounce flat bomb. These grip the bottom much better than, say, an Arsley bomb or something similar. So like I said, I'm trying to nail the bait to the bottom. I'm not trying to have it tripping through with this. So nice heavy lead. So when I cast it, it stays where it is. Quick point to mention about that is there's a lot of dace in this river, and I've noticed in the past when you fish sort of, say, a 10 hook or something like that with half a dendrobina or a small bait, you end up basically them dragging the lead around and putting it in an area where you've not cast. So in this case, contrary to what you do on most rivers, I'm actually trying to nail the bait to the bottom absolutely solid. So moving down, I've got 0.15 reflow power. You can see the twizzle boom there as per usual, and then that just comes down to a size 8 Drennan Super Specialist barbed hook, spade end, really thick gauge, and if something, like I say, picks the bait up with this, the odds are it's not coming off. So as long as I put enough pressure on the fish, I should be able to get them out of any snags. So that's the bomb, and the plan of attack with that is to just drop it in periodically through the day when the peg goes quiet, and I think I'm disturbing the fish a bit too much, but I will start on that, and that'll give me a chance to build the Waggler line that I'm going to fish across. I'm going to fish, as you can see, there's some trees behind me, and I've plumbed up really carefully, and there's a deep channel, and it comes up really steep towards the far bank as we're sort of on the outside of a bend. So I'm going to cast over there and then run the float down. You might look at this peg and say, well, it's not that wide, how come you've picked a Waggler? Well, crucially, there's a swirling wind here. The wind in this peg, because of the high banks and the trees behind us, can be a nightmare, and with a stick, no matter how big of a stick float you use, you'll invariably have a downstream wind and it will just pick up the line. So Waggler's a much easier option, and equally it gives you more sort of control when you're running right down the bottom end of the peg, because there's a bit of pace on the inside here. If the wind catches it, a stick float, you just can't get good presentation. So that's the reason why I've gone for a Waggler. It's also a little bit easier to cast with the high banks, like I say. So I've set two rods up. One's more for dace and roach and trying to sort of feel the peg out, maybe some small chub on that, and the other one's basically an all-out chub rod. So I'll show you the two rigs now. Both 13-foot Waggler rods, and like I say, pretty much sort of even gear between them, pretty much the same thing, but just scaled up on the heavier rod, obviously. So in terms of the reels on both rods, they were TDRs again, or TDMs, sorry. 3012 size, nice powerful reels, quick retrieve, and nice wide spool. On this one, I've got an 016 main line, that's 4 pound day with TDR. So nice and light, like I say, because of the swirling wind, but equally if I went any lighter, sort of 3 pound, if I do hook a bonus chub, a 2-3 pounder, I've got a little bit of faith in it with this. Moving down the rig, we'll start from the bottom end and work up to the float, 'cause it's a little bit awkward to show it. But we've got an 18B 560 down there, that's tied to 012 fluorocarbon, about an 8 to 10 inch hook length. I don't like using hook lengths too long when there's lots of dace in the peg. I think the nearer the drop you can get to the hook, the more bites you'll tend to hit. So I've got a swivel on there because I expect to be in and out quite a lot. There's not tons of pace on the river today, but a swivel helps because, like I say, I might miss a lot of bites off the dace. Shotting wise, as you can see, every sort of 10 inches I've got a number 9, so there's 4 number 9s there. Moving up to the float, which in this case is a 5BB Dave Harrell insert waggler, locked on there with a bit of gap in there just so the float folds on the strike. Absolutely crucial when you're dace fishing is that, because if you're striking through the float you'll miss nearly every bite, so that little gap's really important. Little waggler adapter on there as per usual. Again, like I say, with the wind, if it picks up I can change. And the reason for the insert waggler is because I'm fishing through the water with this. The fish here do have a tendency to come off bottom to loose feed, so I want to be able to catch them through the water. So a nice insert waggler, but with a decent tip on it. These have got a hollow tip, so they'll take a lot of shot, but you can read them really well, and especially when you're fishing in conditions like this where the far bank's very dappled with the water, you can see those clear as day. So that's my first rig. Like I say, I'd expect to get the most bites on that one, and that's the first waggler rig I'll pick up in this session when I'm trying to establish the peg when I go on it. The next rig though, if I lose a couple of fish or it goes really quiet, then I'll straight away pick up this other rod. If there's a chance that there's a chub in the peg, I don't really want to be hooking it on that light gear. I want to be trying catching it on this. So I've gone for a bit of a classic rod in this case. It's quite an old one. It's probably about maybe 20-30 years old, this, but it's an old Silstar multi-mesh match 390. But crucially, it's a really powerful rod, this, for the float. Like I say, it's not one of these modern rods, but you can see the bend in it. There's lovely action to it, but it's very powerful. So it's got the stopping power if I need to get any chub out of the far bank. So in this case I've gone for the same reel, Daiwa TDM again, 3000 size. I've got £6 TDR on this. That's a line I use for method feeder fishing on commercials and all that kind of thing, so it's really robust. We'll start again with the hook in this case with this rig, and I'll work my way up to the float. It's the same shotting pattern, same principle of rig, but like I say, just scaled up. So I've actually gone for a 14s Drennan wide gate match. Really strong hook these, but nice for sort of 3, 4, 5 maggots, that kind of bait. I can even put a section of worm, or if I need to I might switch to caster later on. I can put, like I say, a decent hook bait on that. And it's a forged hook and really sharp with a barb, so if it goes in, again the odds are it's not going to come out and it's not going to straighten. Same again, a shortish hook length, 8 inches. I want to get the bait down and near the bottom with this. I'll probably look to drag a bit of line. There's equally a chance of a barbel on this if I'm lucky. So again, nice and robust, and that's to 018 fluorocarbon. So breaks about £4, but it's strong stuff. I'd be surprised if I got smashed up on that today. Moving up the rig, again, I've got a small match swivel again, as I've said with the previous rig. And then instead of number 9s, I've got doubled up number 8s, 3 pairs of those up to the float. So just a bit more positive, but still dropping the rig through the water rather than a bulk. If I need to fish a bulk, I can always bring those shot down. So rather than fishing number 4s down, put a few number 8s down, I can bring those down into a bulk, and I've got great permutation shotting pattern. The float in this case is completely different. It's a straight waggler, but it's one of Middy's specie wagglers. They're basically like a pellet waggler, but a bit longer. And as you can see, a really nice bulbous tip on that, so you can drag a lot of line on the bottom fish, really big baits, and if you're getting pestered by small fish, they won't be able to set this under quite as easily. That's in a 3.2 grams, so I've just got that locked on there with 2 swan shot and a number 1. These will take a lot more shot than you think, so it's worth bearing in mind that. So, and equally with those big shot, I've left a gap like I've said about the dace bites, but what I always do with my wagglers is I always put number 8 stots either side of the bulk, so I don't have to pinch the bulk on as tight and damage the line. So it's a good little tip is that, and that one I've plumbed up to be about 6 inches over depth, but I'll play around with that through the day. I might even fish it a foot over if it requires it. So that's my plan of attack today. As per usual, I've not shown plumbing up because we've covered that in previous videos, but when you're plumbing up on a river, what I do is I have all the dropper shot on the line, and I don't have the bulk shot around the float, so I'll plumb up with a heavy plummet and not have the bulk shot around the float. I'll just use those 2 number 8 stots, and then you get a really true read in the depth then. And make sure when you're plumbing any river, especially one as sort of tight and as intimate as this, you want to make sure you plumb up really carefully, make sure you know every bit of the channel. And I know in this peg it shallows up down the peg by about 2 foot, so that's something that you need to bear in mind. It also gives me an idea when I do chuck the lead out there that if I want to fish in a deep hole for the chub, I can do. If I think they're on the shallows, I can cast down the peg. So make sure you spend plenty of time when you're plumbing up on rivers, working around your peg and finding out all the depths. So I think that's enough talking done now. I'll get these rigs popped to one side and we'll start the session, hopefully get into a few fish quite early on. Right, so now I'm going to go for the first chuck on the waggler. I'm going to start on double maggot. The fish are really feeding well, but one thing that I'll point out is I'm starting pretty much at full depth, but I suspect within less than an hour possibly I might be fishing a couple of foot deep, but we'll see how it pans out to start off with. See, just making sure I check the line. I'm actually We've got a fish on straight away. Didn't even have a chance to pick up the catapult. Tiny little chub this time. Really small fish, but that was right against the far bank. Just as I was checking the line there, I felt a little bit of a pull. Those maggots are good to go again. Shows how many fish are out there. I'm just making sure I don't hit the far bank. I'm actually going to start fishing with the bail arm on. If the fish are out there in great numbers, then there's obviously no point. It's a small fish again. There's no point clicking the bail arm up, well, keeping the bail arm open until it starts to run down the peg. That's a bleak this time. Just find me a disgorger. Hopefully we can get these fed off and try and get a few better chub. Again, it'll all come down to the shotting pattern, I think, today. Again, with loose feed, there's only so much you can do. If you're fishing ground bait on here, I think today, if I'd have fished the whips again, they've done a really good weight and it'd have been probably a bit more easy and predictable, but I want to try and fish a bit of running line. Yeah, it's a little bit more exciting when you hook a decent fish on running line, at least you've got a chance of getting them out. So again, nice little flick over cast. Keeping the bail arm on. Not even getting a chance to pick up the catapult before it floats going under. I think one more chuck and we're going to change the shotting pattern already. Again, hook bait's fine. So it might be a case of I'm having to feed before I go out. And you can see just how many fish are in the peg. It's like the droppers have actually taken up that time. And there's a small fish on. It's just dropped off. That looked like a little dace. So I think what I'll do is I'll take another couple of foot off the depth because we're just not going to get a hook bait through with this rig. Again, it's always this why it comes down to having plenty of shot on the rig or plenty of small dropper shots rather than just one or two bigger shots. You can start to change the shotting pattern far more easily. So I'm just going to bring those number 9s down. I think I'll just fish with probably 2 number 9s and the swivel down the line. Just see if that helps. Again, just judging by how quickly I'm getting bites, there's no point shallow up by 6 inches at a time. The fish are right under the surface. I've seen some decent ones swirl, so there's no real virtue. You know, I'll just have to keep changing the rig more often, so I'm going to take a bit of a gamble and shallow up by a decent amount. Again, especially if there's bleak in the peg, we might have some trouble. We might have to, as I say, bring a bulk shot into play to just get the bait through the top sort of foot or foot and a half. It's all about finding the layers where the fish are feeding. But I suspect it's going to turn into a case of fishing about probably 2.5, 3 foot deep today, maybe shallower. But I think any shallower than 18 inches, I think it's just going to be bleak. But these are the sort of things you need to assess when you're starting to fish a peg. There's no point me carrying on fishing, like I say, about what, 4 or 5 foot deep when I know the fish are going to be shallower. So I've taken a bit of a gamble and gone really shallow, as I say, probably 2.5 foot this time. Just get a fresh hook bait on and hopefully we'll get through to some better fish. If it turns out that I'm just getting bleak at this depth, then like I say, I'll just go a little bit deeper and bring a bulk shot down. Again, I think I'll stick with double maggot. It just gives me a bit more chance if a bleak does grab hold of it as soon as it goes in. As you can see now with the swirling wind, this is what I was saying about fishing a waggler rather than a stick. Again, I'm going to continue to feed the hemp as well, because as I've already said, I'm going to fish on the bottom at some point. There we go, small fish. That's little dace this time. So 3 fish, we've had 3 different species already. Yeah, I suspect today it might have been an idea to bring even more bait with me, probably sort of 4 or 5 pints of maggots and a couple of big tins of hemp, but as I say, we're only going to fish for a few hours to see what we can catch today. But I do suspect, I think it'll be a case of running out of bait before anything. That's a slightly better fish this time. Look at that, a river rudd, that's a rarity. It's probably going to be fish of the day, that. I did not expect to catch those on here today. What a stunning fish. We'll just pop the hook out of him. If I can build a bag of those on a river, that'll be fantastic. You see, you don't see so many river rudd these days. I've caught a few in Norfolk on the Bure, but certainly not round these parts, but that's a lovely fish, is that. So 4th species off the list already. And if there's a few of those about, hopefully they'll push the bleak out fairly quick. In all fairness, I know there's 1 or 2 rudd in the ooze, but I didn't know that they'd made their way into the nidders yet. But as I say, hopefully through constant feeding we can get that competition right up and start getting a few, possibly even little chublets or something shallow. You can see that wind's becoming a little bit nasty now, so this is when it comes down to another bite and another fish. This is when it comes down to the little things, like I say, with the it's a bleak this time. We're fishing with the bail arm over rather than open. Fishing a little bit heavier waggler than you might need, and like I say, especially not fishing a stick float. If I'd have rigged up a stick today, by now I'd have been absolutely snookered. The weather wasn't so bad, or the wind wasn't so bad this morning, but as we've started the session, it's just got worse and worse. Right, so we've just had that last fish there, so I'm just going to go back out again. I've just tried dotting the float down a little bit more now. Might be a bit too much, but I just want to make sure that I can see all the bites properly as soon as they happen. So I think a few fish have been letting go of it straight away there. What's this? Small chub. Nice little fish, probably about ½ an ounce or so, but hopefully we'll start catching a few of their bigger brothers. Ideally I want to be catching them sort of 3, 4, 5 ounces if I can. Again, when you fish ground bait on this river and whips, you can tend to get the much better stamped dace, sort of the 3, 4 ounces on the bottom, and you can really concentrate them. Again, with the Waggler it's going to be a bit more difficult. As I say, that's why I've got that much heavier rig, and that's why, as I've said already, I'm going to keep feeding the hemp. So even though I might not fish it for a while, it just gets the fish on the bottom and creates, like I say, a nice bed of feed. Amazing how many fish are out there. So your float's going straight away as it goes in. There's definitely quite a few bleak out there. Just going to have to be careful not to hook the far bank here. Again, that's another one of these bleak. Again, if it comes to it, I've always got the option to go to a size 16 hook and really fish a much bigger target hook bait if it requires getting through them, but bleak I've found you can get away with really big hook baits and they'll still hit them. So I think it's more a case down to getting the shotting pattern right. It's amazing where the odd bit of maggots dropped off on top of my keep net at my feet. I can see tons of little sort of 1/4 ounce dace and bleak probably having a feed on them. So it's a really busy way of fishing. That fish just nicked the head off that maggot. I'm already again thinking about going to fish in a bulk. There we go, another fish on. Little dace this time. He's not actually bust the maggots too much, so I'll go back out for another one. You can see when it's fishing like this, it's hard to get the time to feed. Saying about getting your technique right for tiny fish. Getting your technique right for not putting the rod down to feed. Little chublet this time. Smallest fish of the day, that's smaller than a lot of the bleak I've been catching. So as you can see, this wide whip fishing on here is probably the way to go. I think what I'm already going to do is look to bulk that shot above the hook length. Again, you can see from what we started on about sort of 20-25 minutes ago, already we've really changed to our way of fishing. Fishing about 4 or 5 foot deep and strung out shotting. I think I'm going to fish really positive now. Going to bring a bulk of four number 9s down above that swivel, so really positive rig this. Just see if that gets us a few better fish. Again, this is why I was on about having all those shots incorporated in the rig. All the while I'm doing this, I'm building the peg. As I say, I think I'm of the school of thought that when fish start feeding, they attract more feeding fish, and those other fish that come into the peg tend to be of a better stamp. So even if I'm catching small fish on the surface, the activity and the odd bit of bait that might get through, like the hemp, should establish a peg underneath, hopefully of a better stamp of fish. See, that float's gone straight in, bulk settled, feed some hemp. And if the fish are feeding really aggressively, then you can get away with fishing, like I say, really crude shotting patterns. It's a nice gentle flick out. A few maggots. And then draw the float into the feed. Again, it might be the case that I have to spread those shot back out and change the depth again, but on a river like this, that's what it's all about. You know, the more you work at the peg in your rig, the more you'll catch. This style of fishing that you're doing here isn't too far removed from almost a pellet waggler style of fishing. You know, you're constantly in and out, trying to draw the fish up in the water. Loads of indications. Amazing just how many fish are in the peg. I definitely think it won't be long before we have a go on that heavier rig. So I'll be really interested to see what's actually beneath all these small fish on the surface. Another bleak. There's absolutely no consistency as yet to what fish we're catching high up in the water column. As I say, hopefully through constant feeding, if we can draw one or two bigger chub into the peg, they might start pushing the bleak out. Get another fish on straight away. It's a slightly better chublet. And gorgeous colours on them in the clear water. And these are more what we're after, sort of ounce, 2 ounce fish. And get a few of those together. You can start to build a weight, put another couple of decent chub in that you might catch on the deck. So you can really put a decent bag of those together. Just tidy that shot up a little bit. Just try getting a little bit of feed in before I cast out. It's amazing, even just dropping the rigging in front of me, there's little dace and bleak having a go at it. And you can see the wind's an absolute nightmare, but this is why on a small river like this I'm not too fussed about feeding a very sort of general area. As you can see there, I'm way short of where I've been feeding, but I've still got a bite in the fish. Another one of these bleak. And if fishing sort of a 2 metre whip to hand, you could certainly do sort of 10 pound of these bleak. They're actually not a bad size by comparative standards to what you occasionally catch in the ooze. That slightly better chub was caught right in the middle of the feed, and I think that's, you know, if I get into a rhythm, that's where I need to be really. You see this style of fishing, it's all about getting a decent rhythm. And another little chublet. So just that bit further across into the feed area. See, one thing to note, you can see where my keep net's positioned. I've actually got it a bit closer to me on the bank side. You can see when I drop the fish, they just hit the soft mesh and go straight in. So I'm not having to lean forward or anything to drop the fish off the hook. As soon as I'm basically unhooking the fish right over the keep net. And in sort of when you're fishing like this, it's not too important, but in a match, you know, you don't want to be missing the keep net. You know, every ounce would count, and in something like this, it'd very much be a fish race unless you've got someone fishing for Bobble next to you. And that's a bleak this time. You can see straight off the hook, straight in the net. Maggot's are untouched, so I can get straight back out there. Again, you'll never be quite as quick fishing like this as you would be on a whip. But you can certainly do little tricks and things like that to speed up the process. It's mad how many fish are out there now. Right, so a quick update now. We're about an hour and a half in, and we've encountered a few little chub, a few dace, plenty of bleak, and like I say, that one rud. But it's prevalent now. The peg's absolutely solid with fish, so I think it's now time to have a quick go on the deck rig with a much heavier shot in. I'm going to start with those droppers again, but I think what I will do pretty quickly is, like I say, move those down and bulk them. I mean, like I say, the peg's absolutely solid now, and with that lighter Waggler, the float's moving all the time, and you can't really get a true reading of what's going on, even by fishing a bulk shot, like I say, about 1.5 to 2 foot deep. So I think this is where it comes down to having a much heavier rig. So I'm going to put 4 maggots on this size 14, and hopefully see if I can get through them. Again, like I said before, having plenty of shot incorporated into the rig if I need to, I can bulk it all down and just have, like I say, the swivel as a dropper, or even have it right above the hook length. But it's a bit of an awkward cast is this with a much heavier float. I'm just going to have to try and get a gauge of this. More sort of gently plop it into the water. Again, keep loads of bait going in. You can see that's gone straight away. So still with the bail arm on, just waiting to try and read how quick those number 8s are getting down. And they're just about getting through. So at that point in the peg there, where the line's sort of straightened out, I'm going to allow it to run down the peg. Okay, I'm not going to feed on this run through because I want to try and watch it and try and read the float. So it's moving all the time, is that. See a big bunch of maggots on there, absolutely bust, so I'm already going to move some of those shots down into play and create a bulk. So I think what we'll do, we'll keep the swivel. I think I'll bring sort of 6 number 8s down into a bulk. We'll just see if that works. So I'll get that done now and then we'll get back out there. Right, so as you can see now, I've brought that bulk down, so I've got, what, 7 number 8s there, and then just that swivel beneath it, so I've got a little bit of finesse to the rig, and I can, like I say, if I need to go more positive, I can bulk it right above the hook length, but we'll give that a go now. 4 maggots on the big size 14 hook. I'm just trying to sort of plop this in around the area where I've been feeding, let the bulk find its way down. Again, this is what I'm saying about fishing a really general area. So that bulk's pulling the float along, and that bulk's got down now. So it looks to me like that float's just tripping bottom nicely. Again, I'll get used to this rig and try and get it a bit further across the river when I can. You can see I'll definitely take a bit more shot with this. But if it comes to it with this rig, because of how positive it is, I can always fish a bit of worm if I need to. You can see now that's just sort of stuck on the bottom a little bit. So I'll just pull the float back and that'll get the bulk to rise up a little and then it'll allow it to continue to run. It's hard to get my words out then. And that's an area now where the float is, where I'd expect to try and get 1 or 2 better chub, whether it be on this or with the lead. Like I've said, there's a decent channel running down towards that tree. I'd be surprised if much bait's made its way down there, but again, it's an area where chub will tend to sit anyway. So if the float bolts under now, I'm going to have to be straight on it. Again, just going to check the line and get that bulk to swing past the float. If you just let it run all the way, you'll have the bulk dragging behind the float, which isn't ideal. You want it as near to under the float as you can get. So just by checking the waggler and slowing it down a little bit. I've just pulled on something on the bottom there. As you can see, even with this rig on the bottom, those maggots are all very well chewed. It's not the easiest place to get a bait through this today. I think with the conditions, it's almost perfect fishing conditions, which if anything makes the river a little bit more difficult to fish because you've got that many small fish willing to feed. It's hard to get through to the bigger fish. Again, I'm going to stick to what I'm doing, but other options that I do have in this case, like I say, just sitting out on the bomb, even switching to sort of a big stick float and just laying on down the edge with a worm might work. I want to try and get a few fish on the wagglers. So I've got the rig back out there now, and that's a slightly better cast where the bulk's gone well past the float. It looks like that's in a better area now. So I don't think there's much chance really, unless I'm using, like I say, a ledger or a feeder even. But I think a feeder equally, you get battered by bleak. I think it's very hard to get a bait down to the bottom in good condition. So I may even try fishing a section of worm on this rig, just to try and get a target bait through. Still keep feeding the maggots and the hemp, keeping the fish in the peg. Amazing that on a size 14 hook, what have we got here? The smallest chub of the day. Just goes to show what the level of competition of feed is. That's on a 14 hook, is that? 4 maggots it's taken. Thought with the sharpness of the bite we might be into a better fish there, but evidently not. So I think what I'll try this cast, I might just slip on a section of dendrobina and just see, maybe even a well, smallish dendrobina, I think. With a nice buoyant float like this, you can get away with it. And we'll just see what this produces. Just gonna be nice and careful with the cast. What I'll do is I'll feed before I cast out. That's something I found to be much more effective than feeding when the float's in the water. Just allows me to read the bite then as soon as the float goes in. So not the best cast in the world, but we'll give that a go. Again, because we're on the inside of a slight bend here, it will naturally push the float out towards the far bank anyway, where the features are. See a real strong downstream wind, it being pretty much impossible to fish a stick float in this. See a sharp bite on the dendrobina there. Again, I'm just going to lay that in while the wind's blowing. Probably feed about 20 maggots. I'll get some hemp in as well this cast. Probably try and set a bit more of a bed, so I'll put 2 pouches of hemp in. I'll just try and get the float somewhere near. Again, a really difficult rig to cast this with a double bulk, and so it's alright when you're casting much further out with them. They fly really nicely, but when you're just trying to lob them in because of the weight in the float, it's not the easiest thing to do. But I'm having to fish that weight to float so I can drag plenty of line on the bottom and fish as positive as this. With a decent pull under then. And the end of the worm's been nicked. It's a better cast. You can see there's plenty of fish having a go at it, but what I'm going to do is try and let the bite develop a little bit. It just shows they're attacking a decent sized dendrobina on a 14s hook and they're holding on to it. So I think on a day like this you'd have to really fish sort of pellets and boilies to get through to the better chub. I think any sort of natural bait when there's a bit of movement to it, the small fish are just going to attack it regardless. I thought that might have been a better fish there. So it might be towards the back end of the day I change things up and I might start fishing down the edge on chopped worm with dendrobinas and hemp. As you can see with the buoyancy in that float, you can tell how the worm's just tripping along the bottom nicely. Start opening the bail arm now. Thought that might have been a better fish. It just goes to show they've absolutely ransacked that worm. So no matter what bait I'm using, realistically it's going to be a nightmare to get through to the better fish. So I might have to change my approach, or either that or just stick it out on the Waggler fishing shallow. It seems even doing this with a decent hook bait and a very positive rig, that even then I'm sort of getting bitted out, if you like. But you can't really complain when you're getting as many bites as this. Again, I may well have to revert to fishing the lead again and just top up with the feed and try and get the fish feeding even more aggressively than they were initially and try and up the stamp. See how positive a bite that was and nothing there. I'm not trying to hit the bite immediately because I'm hooking the worm through the head. I want the fish to take the bait down just a little bit. Don't want to be pulling it out of the fish's mouth. There we go, that's a better fish. See, a much steadier bite. Not sure what it is yet. It's nodding its head, so it could be a big perch, this. See, I've got the drag tightened fairly tight. You can see with this old rod there's plenty of power in it. If I'd have hooked this on the lighter rod, this might be a challenge. This is a much better fish. Does it look like a big perch then, but I might be wrong. If it is a perch, this is massive. Now I've got him in open water, I'm just going to slacken the drag off a little bit. Again, these old rods, they don't bend right through to the butt like the modern ones. Right, it's a massive perch, is this. It's definitely a PB. Never known a perch fight like this. Once I've actually guessed the fish right as well, but this is a big perch. This could be 2-3 pound. Trying to get in under my feet. That's the biggest perch I've ever seen. Oh, and he's in the net. What a fish that is. Definitely over 2 pounds, that could be 3. It's a shame we don't have the scales to weigh him, but that is a stonking perch. I'll just get the rod set to one side. What a fish that is. No wonder with the sheer number of small fish in this river, the perch go to this size. But that's an absolute monster. I thought it might have been a chub, but luckily managed to get him out. Nailed right in the corner of the lip. Just try and get this hook out of him. We'll try and show him to camera, but that's a personal best perch by a country mile, that for me. Never ceases to surprise us, this river. See if we can just hold him up for camera. Nice if he put his dorsal fin up for us. Look at that for a perch. That is easily 2.5 pound. Again, an absolute specimen of a fish, that one. Be very happy if I caught that in a match. Gorgeous colours on him. You could see there, I let the bite develop and then made sure when I did set the hook, I hit the hook home hard enough. But that's a belting fish. We'll get him popped in the net. Over the moon with that. What a result. I could pack up now and I'd be happy.